sigh of relief and a burden lifted when Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all 3 charges for the death of George Floyd. A small victory, but a giant step forward to correct systemic racism. Despite the guilty verdict, however, racism continues, and we do our part to advocate for social justice. In order to help us, we are providing links in the chat for supportive organizations, and Natalia will put the links in the chat for you. Sunday Salon is pleased that we can offer our platform to all writers. And today, we bring you a stellar lineup with Simone Muench, Virginia Belle, Gina Frangello, and Tim Hillegonds. We thank them for sharing their work. The reading order will be as follows. Simone Muench will kick off the evening, followed by Virginia Belle, then Gina Frangello, and finally, Tim Hillegonds. Okay, so let's begin. We ask that you please mute your audio during the readings and refrain from posting in the chat while authors read their work. Thanks. Our first reader is Simone Muench. Simone Muench is the author of several books, including Orange Crush, Wolf Santos, and Suture, a sonnet collection written with Dean Rader. She and Dean also co-edited They Said, a multi-genre anthology of contemporary collaborative writing. A recipient of an NEA Poetry Fellowship and a Meyer Foundation for the Arts Award, Simone is a professor at Lewis University, where she acts as faculty advisor for Jet Fuel Review. She also serves as a senior poetry editor for Tupelo Quarterly, as poetry editor for Jetlag Press, and is the creator of the HB Sunday Reading Series. Her collaborative chapbook, Hex and Howl, co-written with Jackie K. White, is forthcoming from Black Lawrence Press in 2021. You can visit her website at www.simonemuench.com. Please welcome Simone Muench.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much, Ignatius, for that intro, for the links to social justice, and just to Betsy and Natalia and Ignatius for running this series, which has always been a welcoming space in Chicago. And I'm just so happy to be here again. I cannot stand looking at myself when I'm reading, so I always create PowerPoints. And I know that people actually listen more when you're reading and you don't have visuals, but alas, I'm going to give you visuals. So as I'm sharing my screen, I'll just tell you a few things. The poems I'm going to read today are collaborations with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jackie White. She actually used to work with Rhino, so Virginia may know her. I know Jacob does. And then the artwork that's presented is one of my best friends, Kim Ambrose, and she actually gifted me this woodcut that is the opening visual. So I'm going to read, when Jackie and I have been collaborating as a way to sort of contain the potential chaos of collaboration, we've been writing in a lot of forms. And so I will do several self-portraits lined by other artists and authors that we're reading, and then some sonnets. And the first one is self-portrait lined by Alejandra Pazarnik. And what we do is we take opening lines. Sometimes we bookend the poems with lines by other poets. I am sad in the night of wolf fangs, subdued by a heat so fleshy it could be a dying animal, could breed with its own seething, then eat its young and still sink into extinction. If breeze, if light can't teethe this melancholy into a new folio of beaming, then what of singing? When bleeding marks the skin into a new map, what crawling forward to where? I seek a cool to suck in against this furred humidity, depression's cleaver, a rot that can't be seen or sung into ether as I sketch outlines of a different being, one more than mouth, the feral eased. But day will come. I'll creep quieter than a bird watcher beyond this body's bruised cartography, its broken tongue toward the tender hum. Self-portrait lined by Emily Dickinson. I measure every grief I meet as if I could tether it, tune it, fair weather it, successor to loss, where cobweb and feather are sewn together, where barb and bramble tattoo untruths to the wound's memory of a body gone. Debt hisses like a mocking breeze through spring with its thorny harness. You can try to bracket it, ration it, ladle it as though a briny broth of stinging nettle and crushed bees. No matter, its venom slow dive, a rock-bound flight we can't ever name. They were wrong about the ephemeral. It dilates within, makes us vagrants, scavenging debris, hungry and sheltering in dead leaves, and the warm mulch the dead leave. Self-portrait lined by Evan Boland. I want to know how it happened that those days of bloom closed down into shadow. I want to hold my sickness as though a waxen insect fastened under glass, a found and foreign thing to be studied with its wholeness intact. If I look long enough, will it take on the shape of petals or scalpels? Will it carry my reflection or mutate into a thorned beast? Will my veins be respun as red ivy budding in the cracks of my body and not be shredded frail as chaff? Each minute fills with audible exhale, an effort at singing into the voracious flowering beyond my heaving. Better to burn it all clear, forest, furrow, and garden. There will be no obituary. And then shifting into 3 sonnets. Salt Lick. The deer wants to be iris, the iris glass, but the glass is a licked orange, unsalted. All things remain separate, us too. All things fill themselves with longing. Because the glass remains iris empty, my hands reach deerward toward salt lick and cloud, the edge of field, its horizon of white irises, petticoat pretty but bleached of color like orange pith, bearded blooms fragile as blown glass. We are less delicate, though also leached and licked, a gestalt of raw, or rind peeled back with pining. From a grim war. We dance the moon hours dusk struck, a smear of mulberry on winter birch. We become a Gothic novel, black lace over birdcage, swirling a glass of claret as cobwebs slip into gray macrame. We know the screech owl means to harmonize with the needle, scratching on that old phonograph of body. It's croon, gone crone, gone chord, an Adam's apple of curses, scars that resemble the edges of a blood-slick abattoir. Our mouths ripen with wine, night animals, flowers, as we slip off the human and prowl. And then I'll close this one. I tried to go from sort of sickness and darkness to a little bit of light. Solve for X. Everything is loss and the longing for connection, but the ache of vacancy has no home. Brittle stem flower, headless, every planted thing knows its own uprooting, knows that this is the way we wound, sometimes a needle, sometimes a shovel. Morning's wasp-bright sting turns bodies to stories of wreckage, of folly, the dull, thudding steps we plot for going on. If salve or salvage exists somewhere, do the stories we weave what leads us there? Away from the garden's rot, obit, subplot, towards something less dark, not quite song or sugar water, but a wrought, ripe, sunlit. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Simone. That was amazing. I always love hearing you read your work. Your voice is stunning.
Thank you.
So I am going to introduce our next reader, Virginia Belle. She is the author of the poetry collection From the Belly from Sibling Rivalry Press. She won Nell Magazine's Nonfiction Prize in 2020 for the personal essay Chicken. Her personal essay Battle Axe Day was nominated for a Pushcart Prize by Hypertext in 2020, and her poetry won honorable mention in the 2019 River Sedge Poetry Prize. Her essays, poems, and reviews have appeared in Hypertext, The Night Heron, Barks, Kettle Blue Review, Fifth Wednesday Journal, Rogue Agent, Gargoyle, Cider Press Review, many other places, and other journals and anthologies. And she's a co-editor of Rhino Poetry, and she teaches at Loyola here in Chicago. Please welcome Virginia. And this is my mother-in-law here with me too. So.
Hi.
Thanks.
All right, I had to unmute. Hello, Betsy's mother-in-law. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you, Betsy, for that warm introduction. Thank you, Iggy, and everyone at Sunday Salon Chicago for having me back again. And I'm really humbled to be in the company of such fine writers. Simone, that was stunning. And I just have to give a shout out that one of those collaborative poems will be in the next issue of Rhino that Simone and Jackie have written together. And I'm excited to hear Tim and Gina, and I know how wonderful their writing is. I'm going to read an excerpt from the personal essay called Chicken, and just a tiny bit of a setup. It's a chapter from a memoir that I'm working on, and the memoir is currently titled, Let the Hounds Give Tongue, A Natural History of the 10 Years I Knew My Father. And the memoir is non-linear. It's more like a collection of essays. And I think of it as kaleidoscopic. So each chapter is sort of a retumbling of the pieces and a retelling of the story from a different angle. Chicken, like all the chapters, is what's called a braided essay. So you'll hear that as the narrator, I kind of jump around between different narratives or different discursive modes. So I invite you to kind of listen for that and hear when one mode kicks in and then goes out and another one comes in and then I wrap back around. So this is just a little bit of it, just the beginning really. Chicken. One day, the deviled egg lady showed up at my father's house. She brought her son with her, and the two of us were told to go down to the basement to play. She and my father stayed upstairs. No one else was home. We started down dutifully. It was very dark, even after they flipped on the bare bulb hanging from the rafters. Partway down, we heard a push and another soft click. They had locked the door behind us. Why did the chicken cross the playground to get to the other slide? Why did the rooster go to KFC? He wanted to see a chicken strip. Why did the chicken cross the road, roll in the mud, and cross the road again? Because he was a dirty double crosser. Isaac Newton, chickens at rest tend to stay at rest. Chickens in motion tend to cross roads. Albert Einstein, the chicken did not cross the road passed beneath the chicken. Why did the feminist cross the road? To suck my cock. The boy and I stopped on the stairs, not knowing what to do or what we wanted to do. We had met before, but didn't really know each other, and we weren't playmates. I considered running right back up and pounding on the door, yelling loudly until they gave in. But the boy's lower lip shook like jello. He gripped the railing with hands so pale I could see the blue of his knuckles, and his legs went all Gumby. So I pushed him down the last steps and took him over to my father's workbench. I am telling this story because I never understood it, because I haven't known how to translate it into the stories my mother later told me, how to conform it to her story. The average life expectancy in years for a chicken is 8 to 10, but they can live for 15 or 20 in the right circumstances. My father had a pet chicken that lived less than 1. He rescued her from the biology lab where he taught his students how to incubate fertilized eggs. Normally, he gave the hatched chicks to a local farmer, but he took this one home, and she grew rapidly into a full-size chicken. When he brought me to his house one weekend, she was sitting on a plastic folding chair on the porch. It was the beginning of summer, the air orange, and after dinner, my father lifted the chicken gently, tucked her sharp talons in and under her feathers, and settled her back down onto his lap, petting her like a cat. The next day, she walked around inside the house, past the fish tanks, around the dog and the cats, skittering away if I tried to get close. She pecked at the cracks in the floorboards, the dandelions out in the yard, the curled edges of linoleum in the old kitchen. I would have liked her to be a silky, white with tufted feet like Zsa Zsa Gabor's slippers, a cartoon chicken. But Dad's was a lightly speckled bantam, a common, practical breed, the June cleaver of egg layers. Chicken Little, Henny Penny, the Little Red Hen, Lady Cluck, Clara Cluck, Miss Prissy, Chicken Boo, Bab, Scratch, Ace, Roy Rooster, Chanticleer, Foghorn Leghorn, Fowler, Rocky, Cornelius, Buck, Charlie Chicken, Chicken with Pants. Among the odds and ends on the dusty workbench, there were parts of a lamp my father was trying to fix, and a row of outlets on the wall. I demonstrated to the boy how to lick your finger and then stick it into a live socket. When he refused, I tied him to the workbench legs with a jump rope, grabbed his hand, licked his finger, and stuck it in the socket for him. The zap is immediate. The finger bounces back out and your head swims and swoons. The pleasure is the pleasure of distraction, part tingle, part numbing burn. It's a little earthquake rippling up your arm, a small terror, and then you do it again. At the end of Anne Carson's essay, Variations on the Right to Remain Silent, she plays with translation by giving different iterations of Ibicus's 6th century BC lyric poem about desire. For each iteration, she uses different source material. That is, she chooses the word in English from a lexicon created by the work of someone or something else. Beckett's Endgame, for example, or a microwave oven owner's manual. In one translation, desire overtakes the speaker as a black north wind that shakes his whole breathing being. Ibicus left his home to lead a wandering life. His lyric poems were later referred to as expressions of, quote, homosexual feeling, unquote. And what about Beckett's ham and clove? What is the nature of their coupling? The minutes passed into more than an hour. Our fingertips tingled and grew sore. The boy slumped on the dank cement floor against the bench legs. He sulked, but even when I untied the jump rope, tossed it to the side, he didn't try to get up. When the basement door was finally unlocked, I pulled him upright. We stumbled back upstairs and we entered the kitchen's harsh light. Chickens will often attack a newcomer in their midst because its presence upsets the established pecking order, and because chickens hate overcrowding. It's no organized attack, just a series of intermittent pecks, usually to the comb and wattle, hence seeing red, but more fatally to the vent or cloaca, the exit for everything, poop, pee, and eggs. The pecks intensify until the homicide is complete. Some folks call the cloaca the chicken's vaginus, although that's really inaccurate because the colloquial vaginus refers to the perineum in female anatomy, the area of skin between a woman's vagina and anus, not a conflation of the two into one all-purpose whole. The perineum often tears during childbirth and has to be stitched back up. In the 1950s and 60s, when my siblings and I were born, doctors tended to stitch this up too high so that the vagina would be nice and tight. One Sunday morning in high school, I was curled up reading Lawrence Ferlinghetti's A Coney Island of the Mind when my mother came home from church. She wore a small, glamorous row of silver bangles on one arm, white polyester slacks with an elastic waist, a yolk yellow top, clip-on faux pearl earrings, and red lipstick. She only dressed up for church. Her eyes were red as if she had been weeping, and she sat down close to me, her arm touching my knee. She needed to tell me something, she said. She had been listening to the sermon, she said, and she wanted to tell me she was sorry. In another translation of Ibicus, Carson offers that when it comes to desire, the charge is clear. One is condemned to life, not death. To be a chicken, to chicken out, to play chicken, chicken shit, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. She's no spring chicken. A hen party, a hen house, mother hen, hen pecked. To fly the coop, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Dumb cluck, stick your neck out. Your chickens have come home to roost. Cockeyed, cocksure, there ain't nobody here but us chickens. Back up in the kitchen, I stared at the deviled egg lady's legs. Her tan stockings and shoes had disappeared. Her skin was bright pink and her ankles narrow and bony, like Barbie ankles. She was sitting at the table sipping coffee in bare feet. Her toes touched the linoleum, but her arches, molded high by the heels she always wore, lifted the backs of her feet into the air, like Barbie feet. Her coffee smelled like ice cream. Dad's coffee smelled dark and bitter, like charcoal. He at least had socks on. My mother told me she was sorry for not being able to forgive my father. For what? I said. For being a homosexual, she said. He had been sick, she said. He had been dead for 7 years. You would think this news would have surprised me. In yet another Carson translation of Ibycus, desire will burn your nose right off. Somehow it didn't. My mother's revelation seemed like the keystone, the linchpin, the piece that would finally hold everything else in place. It made all her stories make sense, except the deviled egg lady story. The use of the word devil in relation to food first appears in English in 1786 to describe a highly seasoned fried or boiled dish. Although humans have been scooping out egg yolks, mashing them with stuff and restuffing them, probably since ancient Rome, see the cookbook of Apicius. Etymologists date the American name deviled eggs to the 19th century because of the recipes that began to call for mustard. Washington Irving described hot curries as deviled. I became obsessed with deviled eggs one spring afternoon when my father took me to a party at a pretty lady's house in a development in the town where he lived. Everything was new. The trees were young and small and pale green. Nothing blocked the sun. The split-level houses were painted powder blue and mauve, and all the doorbells chimed. The lady wore a dress and brought out a field of deviled eggs on a shiny round platter. The filling in the eggs varied in color. Just a few held plain old yellow. I wanted to eat them, to taste each one. Green like green eggs and ham, pink as bubblegum, purple as a bruise, blue like the taste of the sky or the inside of a lake. I imagined the lady in the kitchen that morning, an apron protecting her dress, mixing little mounds of egg stuffing in 5 separate small bowls, squirting in the dye and stirring until they were each just the right hue. From then on, I thought of her as the deviled egg lady. From then on, there were eggs and there were eggs. How can a thing both be one thing and another? Perhaps I am an incompetent storyteller. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was just beautiful. And I remember Betsy saying that she had heard this particular essay, and it's just as beautiful as she said it was. It's really, really lovely, very moving. And well, I have the pleasure of introducing our third reader, Gina Frangello, and I will read a short bio for Gina. Gina is the author of 4 books of fiction, in addition to the memoir, which I believe she's going to read from tonight, Blow Your House Down. A story of family, feminism, and treason. Counterpoint Press, 2021. She has nearly 20 years of experience as an editor, having founded both the independent press, Other Voices, and in the fiction section of the popular online literary community, The Nervous Breakdown. She has also served as a Sunday editor for The Rumpus and as a faculty editor for both Tri-Quarterly Online and the Coachella Review. Her short fiction essays, book reviews, and journalism have been published in such venues as Salon, the LA Times, Plowshares, the Boston Globe, BuzzFeed, and the Chicago Tribune, the Huffington Post, and in many other magazines and anthologies. Gina lives mainly in Chicago and occasionally in the California desert with her family and 3 gluttonous cats. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Gina. And my printer wasn't working today, and so I had to read from my phone. So I apologize for some slowness, but it's really a pleasure to have you. And I'm very excited to hear an excerpt from Blow the House Down. So
thank you so much,
forward.
Natalia, everyone.
Of course.
I am an alum of this series as well, and it's really nice to be back. That the real thing happens right around the corner from my house, so it's sort of like it's sad because I'm almost there. So anyway, I did just release a memoir, "Blow Your House Down: A Story of Family, Feminism, and Treason" on April 6th. So it is still quite new, and I'm going to just make it easy and start reading from the beginning of it. This is from the first chapter, which is titled "Story of A." And it begins with a quote: "The lie which elates us is dearer than 1,000 sober truths." And that's Anton Chekhov misquoting Pushkin. A is for adulteress, but you knew that. There's virtually no history of literature without the adulteress. Anna Karenina, Emma Bovary, Hester Prynne, Daisy Buchanan, Molly Bloom. The adulteress throws herself in front of a train, runs over her husband's lover with a car, walks into the ocean intent on dying without a care for her children. A is for adulteress, agent of ruin, woman. A is for accused. Researchers at Cardiff Metropolitan University revealed that when there has been infidelity in a marriage, most wives tend to blame the other woman, whereas most husbands see their cheating wife as the guilty party. Basically, whoever dropped dead in the broom closet, the adulteress did it. A is for author. Allow me to reveal the A on my breast. For the sake of this narrative, my name might as well be A. Once a woman becomes an adulteress, her other identities, mother, daughter, friend, editor, writer, teacher, become largely invisible to others, as irrelevant as the clothing she whorishly, treasonously shed. A is for asshole. There is no slur for men to match the equivalent of mistress or even other woman. Philanderer doesn't have the same punch and is sex non-specific. Cuckold denotes a man who's being cheated on. A player or even a dog can be single or married. An asshole can be the guy who took your parking space at Trader Joe's, as well as the man who fucked your wife. There are no names specifically for men who break their promises to women. A is for age. For the first time in documented human history, among adults 18 to 29 who have ever been married, a general social survey reports that women are marginally more likely than men to be unfaithful. The survey also found that infidelity rates increase in middle age for both men and women, and that contrary to both popular and literary stereotypes, women reach their highest levels of infidelity in their 60s. A is for analysis. While wives initiate almost 70% of divorces, the researcher Michael Rosenfeld recently made the surprising discovery that no similar gap between the sexes, or any gap at all, exists between the percentage of breakups initiated by women and men living together without marriage. Rosenfeld also found that, although married women have long reported lower levels of satisfaction with relationship quality than married men, those in non-marital relationships reported equal levels of quality. These results, Rosenfeld said, quote, support the feminist assertion that some women experience heterosexual marriage as oppressive or uncomfortable. A is for adultery. In the United States, adultery remains illegal across 17 states. In Illinois, where A first kissed her lover, the wronged spouse can even sue the cheater's lover for alienation of affection. In Massachusetts, where A and her lover reinstated their affair 2.0 after having been broken up for nearly 9 months, adultery is a felony, theoretically punishable by up to life in prison. A is for old, and there's a strike drawn through that. A is for hag, strike. A is for crone, strike. A is for ancient. Various recent studies using extensive data from online dating sites have revealed that women's perceived attractiveness by men hits its highest point at the age of 18 and declines steadily thereafter, Elizabeth Birch, and that the peak age of women's attractiveness is somewhere around 22 or 23, Christian Rudder. According to Rudder, co-founder of OkCupid, quote, "Younger is better and youngest is best of all," end quote. For men, by contrast, attractiveness seems to increase steadily with age, peaking somewhere between 46 and 50. Given these facts, one might wonder what irrational force could possibly have prompted A to believe that she still matters enough for all this fuss to begin with, for all this inconveniencing of other upstanding people who had expectations of and plans involving her. Just look at the way she's carrying on, as though she honestly doesn't realize she's statistically unfuckable anyway. A is for the audacity of her. A is for animal testing. In Esther Perel's The State of Affairs, the author indicates that while rates of infidelity are on the incline, public compassion for adulterers is not. According to a 2017 Gallup poll, Americans have become more relaxed about most things sexual, from premarital to teen to gay sex, but adultery remains condemned at higher rates than, quote, abortion, animal testing, or euthanasia, end quote. A is for audience. Recently, A attended a party celebrating a novel about a married professor who gets a terrifying medical diagnosis and goes out and begins fucking her student. The novel's author began her reading that night by stating that if her middle-aged protagonist had been a man, there likely would have been no novel because nothing out of the ordinary would have happened. After the reading, all the audience really wanted to talk about was how immoral, inexcusable, and wrong the novel's protagonist was, pressing the author to concur with their judgments and thereby transforming her narrative of disruption into a narrative of reassurance. The author, trained as all women are to be agreeable in crowds, demurred that she did not recommend anyone trying her protagonist's actions at home, but suggested that that might not be the point. One audience member asserted that the very outrageousness of the protagonist's behavior qualified the novel as satire, even though everyone present, including the men, seemed to agree with the author that had the protagonist been a man, there would have been no book at all. A is for Alice. A's mother, Alice, was once told by A's father that she should take a lover because A's father was no longer interested in sex, at least with his wife, and could not satisfy her. Although she had at least 2 opportunities that A knows of, altruistic Alice nonetheless remained faithful to her asexual husband, even past his death. A is for anti-heroine. This is not that kind of book. A is for antecedent. In 1997, the year A first encountered her future lover by accepting one of his stories over the transom for the magazine she was newly editing, adultery laws were used to charge a Harvey, Illinois woman with the same crime that A would 15 years later commit. A is for aphorism. Esther Perel, infidelity has a tenacity that marriage can only envy. A is for animosity. In the state of Connecticut, where A's lover was born and raised, 6 people were charged under adultery laws between 1985 and 1990, the year A met her husband. Although a New Haven attorney referred to the law as a dinosaur, Connecticut authorities claimed that they had no choice but to enforce it. A misdemeanor carrying a $1,000 fine, the law also carried the possibility of imprisonment for up to 1 year. Single people cannot be charged, which may be the only aspect of such outdated morality laws that actually break from misogynistic tradition by making it possible to prosecute a cheating husband, but not his so-called mistress, unless she too is married. One can presume that although there were only 16 arrests on record during this time period, that more than 6 human beings did commit adultery in the state of Connecticut between 1985 and 1990. So in other words, the real requirement for being arrested for adultery is the presence of a spouse who is angry enough at your deception that they would like to see you in prison for it. A is for artifice. It seems that the real reason the Harvey, Illinois Police Department charged that woman and the auto mechanic she was fucking with adultery in goddamn 1997 may have been that they were afraid that her husband, who had come home to find them in bed, would become violent and kill them. Hence, they carted all 3 off to the police department and pressed charges against the wife and the mechanic to hold them there. Cook County prosecutors later decided not to pursue the case. A is for aphrodisiac. Quote, I tried to keep myself away from him by using con words like fidelity and adultery, by telling myself that he would interfere with my work, that if I had him, I'd be too happy to write. I tried to tell myself I was hurting him, hurting myself, making a spectacle of myself. I was, but nothing helped. I was possessed. The minute he walked into a room and smiled at me, I was a goner. End quote. Erica Jong, Fear of Flying. A is for atonement. A's lover, when she mentioned wanting to write an amends letter to his wife. She doesn't want to hear from you, and that's never going to change. A's husband on the matter. Letters are for cowards. When A thinks of the word atonement, she usually thinks, almost accidentally, alonement. A is for arithmetic. No matter how ashamed of herself a narrator may be, the mathematics of accountability nonetheless dictate that A plus A plus A plus A can never equal I. And I'll stop there, which is where it shifts into first person and a more conventional narrative most of the time. Thank you.
Oh my God, Gina, that was amazing. Congratulations on the book. I can't wait to read the rest of it. It's amazing. Thank you so much for coming. So I have the pleasure to introduce our last reader of the night, Tim Hillegonds. He's the author of the memoir, The Distance Between, which was a finalist for the 2020 Chicago Writers Association Book of the Year Award. His work has appeared in The Guardian, The Chicago Tribune, Salon, The Daily Beast, River Teeth, Fourth Genre, The Rumpus, and various other places online and in print. He was also named by the Guild Literary Complex as one of their 30 writers to watch in 2019, and he serves as contributing editor for Slade Glass City, a digital journal of the urban essay arts. Please welcome Tim.
Hey, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to read. It was one of the casualties of COVID. I was scheduled to read, and then of course we couldn't meet. So it's really great to be back here. So thanks to Sunday Salon, to Betsy, Natalia, Ignatius. Appreciate all the work that you do for this series, and can't wait to do it again in person. Thanks to my fellow readers and amazing writers, Simone, Virginia, and Gina. Gina, congrats on the book. Can't wait to read it. So I think tonight I'm going to read 2 sections from the memoir that I published in 2019 called The Distance Between. It's a book that is about sort of, I had $100, a snowboard, and a bag of clothes, and I moved out to Colorado to kind of get away from the trouble I was in Chicago, only to move out there and find myself in a little bit more trouble. But I got into a relationship with a young woman out there named April, who was a mother, had a small daughter, and then April soon became pregnant with my daughter. And we were in a relationship over the course of 3 years that was toxic and sometimes violent. And the story is about sort of those years and what happens then. But what I was thinking about recently is that this year I actually celebrated my 16th year of sobriety. And as I was, as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about, what it means to get sober, all the work and pain and joy and grace and love that make up stories of recovery. And that sort of got me thinking about the distance between and some of the times before that. So I thought what I would read tonight were two sections that are about the time before recovery. And so a few things that you need to know from this first section is that I worked at a restaurant in Chicago called Baker Square. Karen was a waitress I worked with. A couple of Baker Square fans out there. French silk pie, big favorite. So Travis was a friend who had moved to Colorado a few months earlier. And just before I had moved out there, I had ended a short but amazing and fun career as a professional inline skater. I think often about the days when I skated in front of those crowds and missed the visceral feeling of satisfaction it gave me. Those people cheering, their hands clapping and voices shouting, their collective praise wrapping me in a blanket of affirmation I never wanted to shed. It felt so good to be watched, to be authenticated, to be deemed worthy of adulation. I basked in the moments just after landing a huge trick when I could literally feel the crowd's energy entering through the pores of my skin. And I wonder now whether that was the start of it, the beginning of my lifelong struggle with substances. The dopamine release and the subsequent longing for more, the adrenaline, is that where it all truly began? I was sustained for hours and sometimes days by those moments, by the lift they gave me, by the social and emotional capital they infused me with. But as time passes, the highs were progressively shorter, the lows progressively longer, the cravings for those moments progressively stronger. I was no longer satisfied with simply having those moments. I needed to live inside of them, to embody them, to burn them or smoke them or swallow them, to chop them up into little white lines and breathe them into my bloodstream. No matter how good those moments were, no matter how brightly they lit me up, I always needed more. And I would crash or burn whatever it took to ensure that I would have them. In the fall of 1996, a month or so after I first talked to Travis about Colorado, I slid into a red vinyl booth across from Karen, the waitress I was working the afternoon shift with at Baker Square, and grabbed a cigarette from the open pack on the table. "What's it like?" I asked her. "What's what like?" she said, blowing smoke into the air above us. "You know, Coke. I mean, what does it do to you?" She tapped her cigarette on the edge of the brown ashtray between us, caught my eye before looking away. "I don't know how to explain it, Tim. It's good, though. I guess it just makes everything around you a little bit more fun." I nodded to her and put the cigarette to my lips, inhaled. More fun sounded like exactly what I needed. Everything had become so much less fun lately. "I want to try it," I said, wiping away an ash that had fallen to the table. "Can you get some?" I met her at a bowling alley one Friday night a couple of weeks later. She was drinking Miller Lite from a pitcher and saw me almost as soon as I walked in. "Tim," she yelled from across the room, arms waving above her head like she was directing an airplane. I walked to her and she poured me a plastic cup of beer from the pitcher on the high top table and introduced me to her friends. I shook their hands and made small talk with Karen for a few minutes, but I was there for a reason. "You got it?" I asked when it seemed like no one else was listening. "Hold on," she said. "I need to get it ready first." She grabbed her pack of cigarettes and slid the cellophane wrapper off the bottom of it, told me to wait while she went to the bathroom. I lit a cigarette and leaned back in my chair. Over the hollow crashing of bowling pins and classic rock music, I sipped my beer and watched her friends. They looked a lot like what I thought they would look like: construction workers and bikers, most of them with goatees and Harley-Davidson t-shirts, a few pairs of dirty steel-toed boots under the chairs where they'd kicked them off to put on their bowling loafers. I wondered if any of them knew my father. Karen returned from the bathroom and put her hand on the table, slid it over to me. "Here," she said. I glided my hand over to hers, grabbed the cellophane wrapper, closed my fist around it, leaned back, and stuffed it into the pocket of my jeans. "Where should I do it?" I asked. "Just go to the bathroom. I'm sure it'll be fine, but be careful. Make sure no one walks in on you." I stubbed out my cigarette, stood up, and walked to the bathroom. Happy to find it empty, I walked into the stall closest to the back wall. My heart, beating hard since the moment Karen had passed me the cocaine, was now galloping, knocking against my rib cage. My palms were sweating and my hands were shaking, but I managed to dump the cocaine onto the back of the toilet without spilling. The movies always made cocaine look like a fine powder, but this was more like little white chunks, little specks of crumbled drywall. I forgot to ask Karen exactly how to do it, but I'd seen enough films to know the basic idea. I pulled out my wallet and used my driver's license to crush the rocks into a fine powder and then scrape the cocaine into a straight line. I rolled up a dollar bill, and then for a moment, I simply stood there with my heart pounding and my hands shaking, looking at the line of cocaine on the back of the toilet, at the piss stains on the edge of the bowl, at the piece of toilet paper that had fallen to the floor. Outside the bathroom, I could hear pins crashing, people laughing, and a toilet flushing in the women's restroom. And for the briefest of seconds, I wondered what I was doing. It felt like maybe something fundamental was about to change, like I was about to cross a line I couldn't come back from. But there was such pleasure and risk, such thrill in not knowing how deep the waters were and jumping anyway. So I bent over the porcelain, put the dollar bill to my nose, and inhaled. So this last piece that I'll read here is near the end of the book. So I moved to Colorado, I meet April, we have a baby, I get in a lot of trouble. We break up, we get back together, we break up, and it's this kind of toxic cycle of endless things that aren't changing. But I try to talk her into giving me one more chance. And so we decide to spend one more night together right before the new millennium. It was New Year's Eve, and I was standing in the living room of April's apartment, and we were both already a few shades past buzzed. She looked so good to me, and it felt so normal, so like it used to be, in the curls in her hair were styled so they fell in specific places on her shoulders. Her blonde hair and that black shirt, blonde on black. Her jeans were tight and her top was too, and she held out her hand in front of her like she was presenting me with an actual silver platter. Here, she said, eat this. I picked up the small piece of paper from the palm of her hand and said, I've never done acid before. And she said, then you're in for a treat because it's New Year's Eve right before the new millennium and the whole world is about to change. I smiled and laughed because I wanted my world to change, maybe more than I wanted anything else in my life. I said, that sounds perfect, April. And I placed the acid on my tongue and waited while it dissolved. She smiled back at me and did a little spin. And then she said, how do I look? And I said, you look so beautiful, April, so good. But I couldn't stop thinking about the acid on my tongue and how my world was going to change. It didn't taste like anything. It didn't taste bitter like I thought it would. And so I started to wonder if maybe I got a dud hit or something, that maybe there was a drug dealer somewhere who was slacking on the job the night he made my hit. And I was about to ask April about it, but then she was pulling me out the door because the cab is here and it's time to fucking go. And then we were in the back of a moving cab as it got on the highway to Frisco so we could go to the bar, but we weren't paying attention to the time. And I thought we were cutting it close and I wasn't ready for the new millennium just yet. I was just about to say something again, but it was hard to talk and my mouth felt like it was chewing on a rubber toy and the lights, holy shit, the lights look so fucking amazing. April, I said, do you see these lights? Do you see these fucking lights? Oh my God, these lights are amazing. She looked at me and smiled and her teeth were perfect and white and happy. And I wanted to tell her that too, but then she was pulling me out of the taxi because we made it to the bar and she'd already given the cabbie the $20 bill and told them to keep the change. We made it to the line of people waiting in the freezing cold and then we were standing in it and the lights were back and I was looking at them again, wishing I could put them in my pocket, wondering how I never noticed them before. And then the sidewalk was moving, or maybe it was just me, and I heard voices counting down, counting backwards from 10. I looked around at the line full of people, and I didn't know any of them, and I didn't really want to, and I was starting to feel nervous about it, but then April's hand was on my shoulder, and her face was right in front of me, and her voice was saying, you're okay, just breathe, just breathe. And she was right. I was okay, and I was just breathing, and then it was 3, 2, 1, and then we were kissing, but it was just a quick one and we hadn't done it in so long that even the quick one felt strange. And then the line was moving and April pulled me through the door and there were people everywhere and it was the new millennium and how the fuck did I even get here to Colorado, to April, and where is my fucking daughter? Because I have one, right? A daughter. a beautiful, small, perfect little thing that I used to hold all the time, but now I never do. And I miss her so badly, and I think she might miss me too. But then we were on the dance floor and I was drinking a beer and it tasted so good in my throat, those bubbles scratching away. And I thought when I was done swallowing, I might start purring like a kitten because the bubbles felt so good and maybe that would too. But then April was pulling me out the door again because the bar was closing and it was time to go home. April had our jackets and I pulled mine on and we started walking down the street and the ice was crunching below us and it was so cold and the lights weren't quite as amazing and we couldn't get a cab. So we started walking with our thumbs out, hitchhiking. A car pulled over and April said, "Can you get us to Silverthorne?" And the guy was wearing a plastic party hat and he said, "Hell yeah, it's too cold to be walking, so get in." And he drove us all the way back to April's. He dropped us off and we said thank you, or maybe just April did, because I'd been having a hard time talking all night and I thought I would really rather just be listening this time anyway. But when April opened the door, I realized that I would really rather be sitting on the ground, warm, watching TV. So that's what we did. April on the couch, me on the floor with our jackets on in the dark that comes right before dawn. On the television was a replay of the ball dropping in New York, and I still couldn't believe it was the new millennium, and I was about to say that when I heard a noise. I turned and I saw that she was crying, sobbing actually, her eyes glassy and wet. "What's wrong, April?" I said. "What's wrong?" But now she couldn't say anything, and so she just cried, streams of tears running down her face. And so I started crying too, because I didn't know what else to do. And maybe this was what the whole night had been leading to anyway. A whole bunch of weeping, the sparkling ball in New York dropping slowly on the television, the two of our faces flashing in the dark, heavy and wet with tears. Thank you.
Tim, that was amazing. I just was like riveted. Really, thank you so much. And what is the name of your book so people can look for it if it's available?
Oh, mine?
Yeah.
The Distance Between.
Okay. So all right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to, so I'm closing. I'm just going to give another thank you, not only to Tim, of course, but to Gina and to Virginia and to Simone. And another thank you to everyone who joined us here tonight. We always say that we would not be here without all of you, of course. And I also want to let you know two things. Our next reading will be next month, May 23rd. And I can tell you who's going to be reading. Again, sorry for the phone thing. So May 23rd. Allison Epstein will be reading from a novel that she recently launched. Our own Ignatius, who launched a novel last January and did not get a chance to tour with it. So we're kind of making up for that. And then Sarah Connell, who some of you might know from Northwestern. And then Esther Ying Ling Spodek. So please join us in May. And if you're interested, I have put in the chat section different links to different organizations that sort of advocate for gun control and police justice and everything from the ACLU to Black Lives Matter. So if you're interested in getting involved or knowing more about those organizations, they will be in the chat. And now is the time when those writers who can stay, please stay. We'd like to do a question and answer 20 minutes or so. So we can get that started. I'm going to change my view from one speaker to many. There. So whoever wants to start with a question, please go ahead.